Now what we want to talk about are solving two-step equations. So just as a review, what we did in last class is we talked about one-step equations. So if I had 4b equals 16, I would draw my line. Since this is multiply, all right, the opposite would be to divide. Divide both sides by 4. This 4 and this 4 cancel each other out, so I'm left with b on this side, and 16 divided by 4 is going to leave me with an answer of 4. So I have b equals 4. To check it, I would say 4 times 4, and that's 16, and that's what I want to get. So that's a check. And the same here, I have x plus 1 equals negative 4. I draw my line. The opposite of plus 1 is minus 1. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. These guys cancel. I'm left with just x. And then negative 4 minus 1 is going to leave me with negative 5. So x equals negative 5. I check it. Negative 5 plus 1. Negative 5 plus 1, I get negative 4. That's the correct answer, so that's a check. X divided by 5, that should be equals 10 there. And so x divided by 5, we do the opposite of divide by 5, which is multiply by 5. Those guys cancel. Here's my line, times 5. And x is going to equal 50. Going and checking. 50 divided by 5 is going to be 10, and those check. X minus 2 equals 3. The opposite of minus 2 is plus 2. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Those guys cancel. The x comes down, and I have 5. And then I go ahead and say 5 minus 2. That sure enough, that equals 3. And these guys, sure enough, check. Okay, so that's just a quick review of what we've already done. Now what we're going to do is called two-step equations. Now, the thing about two-step equations is that we want to go ahead and we want to solve it the opposite way that we solve order of operations. Where if we think about order of operations, we have please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that meant that we had to do multiplication and division before we did addition and subtraction. But with two-step equations, that's for the order of operations, okay? But for two-step equations, what we want to do is we want to take care of the addition and subtraction before multiplication and division. So it's Aunt Sally, my dear, in this case, okay? So addition and subtraction we take care of first. Multiplication and division we take care of second. So when I'm doing this, what I want to do is I always want to solve for the variable, okay? So basically, my variable wants to be on the side all by itself. It doesn't want to hang out with any numbers. The 4 is what we call a constant. The 2 is what we call a coefficient. It doesn't want to hang out with any of those guys. It wants to be on the side of the equation all by itself, and that's what we try to solve for. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, just like I did with my one-step equations, draw my line. Now, Aunt Sally, my dear, okay, so that means I got to take care of this addition first, okay? So I'm going to subtract. The opposite of plus 4 is minus 4. The opposite, and then whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Still stays the same way there. These guys cancel. On this side of the equation where the variable is, there's just going to be a lot of canceling going on, okay? It's not going to be a whole lot of math going on. When you're on the side of the variable, all we really want to do is we just want to cancel that stuff out. Okay, so I have 12 minus 4, I end up with 8. What I have to do is I have to bring down what I haven't messed with. And the thing I haven't messed with is that 2x, okay? So that 2's hanging on. Now I'm on to my dear, okay? I've taken care of Aunt Sally. Now I'm moving on to my dear. So I need to take care of my multiplication and division. Since side by side is multiply, I do the opposite, which is divide by 2, and whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Those guys cancel. I'm left with x, and it's going to equal 4. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Let's check it out. I'm going to say 2 times 4, because I said x equals 4. So 2 times 4 plus 4. Now I go back to regular order of operations. 2 times 4 is 8. Plus 4, that's 12. That 12 is the same as that 12, so it's a check. This next problem looks a little bit similar, but it's a little bit different as well because we're dealing with an integer, that negative 2. So the first thing I'm going to do with this, draw my line. I have plus 4, so remember, want to take care of addition and subtraction before multiplication and division. And if you need to go ahead and write that beside it so you can remember, it might be a good idea, okay? Because we don't want to, because what some people try to do is divide everything first, and then it's all kinds of craziness going on, okay? So first of all, I'm going to subtract 4. All right, draw my line. Those 4's cancel. See how on that first problem, all that really happened was we were canceling stuff out, so we get x all by itself. And you have to follow these steps. If you're choosing to write this a different way right now, you're not doing the right thing. Okay, if you're doing something completely different from what I'm doing right now, you need to erase it and you need to go back and write down exactly the same way I'm doing it. It will not be accepted any other way. The problems will get harder, and so we need to be comfortable with this format now. Okay, so I canceled those 4. 10 minus 4 is 6. And so all I'm left with is negative 2x on this side. Negative 2x is 6. So I divide by negative 2, because side by side is multiply. Those guys cancel. I'm left with x. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. Let me check it out. Let's see, negative 2 times, we said x is negative 3, times negative 3 plus 4. Negative times a negative is a positive 6 plus 4, and that's going to be 10. Sure enough, 10 and 10 check out. Okay. For some reason, I threw in a one-step equation in here. I'm not exactly sure why, but it did have that fraction there, which kind of scares the bejesus out of some of us. So what I'm going to do is I need to get rid of that 1/3. In order to do that, I multiply by its reciprocal, which is 3, or 3 over 1, times 3. There's my line. The 1/3 and the 3 are going to cancel out. We talked about that in our one-step notes. All that's left on this side is x. Negative 10 times 3 is negative 30. So now I have, check it, 1/3 times negative 30 equals, see if it equals negative 10. That's what we need to see if it does. So I'm going to say 1 over 3. I'm going to put that 30 over the 1, and I'll have negative 30 over 3. Divide that, and I get negative 10. That negative 10 equals that negative 10. Okay, so here's another two-step equation. I'm going to add 10 to both sides. Remember, addition and subtraction before my dear, okay? Or multiplication and division. The opposite of minus 10 is plus 10. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Those guys cancel. Remember the side with the variable. All we're really going to be doing is kind of crossing it out, showing mathematically what's going on. That's what you need to get into the habit of. X over 2 is 17, so I'm going to multiply. The opposite of divide is multiply, so I'm going to multiply by 2, both sides. Those 2's cancel. Remember, that's our inverse property of multiplication. It says that can happen. So I have X, and it's going to equal 34. So let's go ahead and check our math here. 34 divided by 2 minus 10. Okay, 34 divided by 2, that's going to be 17 minus 10 is 7. And that 7 check out. So good job. All right. So I added this last problem here just to kick it up a notch. Because all this time what I've been saying is addition and subtraction, my dear. Okay, and saying that I got to take care of my addition and subtraction before I can multiply and divide. When you see a problem like this, this is where we run into a bit of an exception. Okay, what I'm going to do with this problem is, when I see it like this, I'm like, oh man, I don't know what's going on. So what I need to do is I need to get rid of that divide by 3. And all we do is we do our inverse operation. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. By doing that, those guys just go away. So I'm left with negative 6 plus x. And then I have 33 here. Okay, I'll give you a second to write that down and see what's happening there. I'm getting rid of that divide by 3 because the whole problem is being divided by 3. It's not just x being divided by 3, it's that negative 6 as well. So I want to go ahead and get rid of him, and that's why I did what I did. And in math, it's okay. You can do this. As long as you're doing the same thing to both sides, multiplying both sides by 3, your equation is remaining balanced. Okay, and that's our goal, to make sure that it remains balanced. Okay, so now I'm going to add 6 because it's a negative 6. So in order to get rid of that, I add 6. And I'm going to do it to both sides. And I'm just left with x equaling 39. To check that, I would say negative 6 plus 39 divided by 3. Okay, negative 6 plus 39 divided by 3, that's going to be 33 divided by 3, which equals 11. And sure enough, those guys check out. Thank you.